Good afternoon. In this video, I want to again address James White's very simplistic thinking dealing with the King James Bible issue. And this is on page 107, he's dealing with Erasmus again. And I'm going to read here from the bottom of page 107 in the second edition. He says there are other important errors as well. Again, these are assertions on White's part, not facts. The final 6 verses were absent from Erasmus' lone manuscript pressed for time. He translated the passage from the Vulgate into Greek so as to avoid a gaping lacuna in the text. And let's see here. Then he's got lacuna as a hole or gap in the text. He's got a footnote for it. And admitting the action of in his own notations. We may chuckle at such a procedure today, and certainly Erasmus took criticism for it, but anyone familiar with the languages involved has to admire how well he did, all things considered. In the process, he did make a number of mistakes, and there's his assertion. And he has improved these are opinions that they're mistakes, not facts. And he also has a footnote here. H.E. Hoskia theorized that Erasmus did in fact translate from the Latin into Greek, despite Erasmus' statements to that effect. And you'll find, if you read Crown with Glory, Thomas Holland goes into detail, showing that it's clear that Erasmus did have access to a Greek manuscript, because the readings don't match up exactly with the Vulgate either. That's shallow scholarship on the part of James White. Again, page 108. The amazing thing is that these mistakes continue in the TR to this very day. Now remember, these errors supposedly occurred in the Erasmus, I think, 3rd edition. There are 2 more editions that follow. Why Erasmus did not change them at a later time, we cannot say. Okay, he unashamedly used a better text of Revelation in his later editions, but he left these errors intact. So you notice the assumption of the errors. Here's a thought. Maybe they're not errors. How about that? Even more mind-boggling is the fact they then survived the editorial labors of Stephenus and Beza to arrive unchanged in the hands of the King James Version translators, and subsequently ended up in the King James Version. So in the simplistic mind of James White, he makes an assertion. This is called begging the question, and then thinks it's a fact. So then he has to overcome the fact that Erasmus did have access to better manuscripts in Revelation, that Stephenus had access to better manuscripts in Revelation, and Beza as well. White says that Beza was in fact the first-rate textual scholar, and yet White throws his hands up and I can't explain how these errors remained all this time in the Textus Receptus. Well, any rational person would say that they're not errors, and have to go back and look at it and say, gee, the fact is that even if Erasmus did translate from the Vulgate, the other manuscripts, later manuscripts, supported those readings from the Vulgate. So again, the use of the claim that Erasmus used the Vulgate is a red herring. The only issue is, were they in fact errors? And White can't explain a lot of things. But again, he starts with an assertion, and then he thinks an assertion is a fact, and then he moves on as if the fact has already been proven. And this is a mindset. This is a very simplistic, shallow way of thinking. It is not scholarship. It is not scholarship at all. But then he'll look at, well, why did Stephenus change it? Why did Beza change it? You can't explain it. Why did Erasmus not change it later on? They can't explain it. But then he just moves on and again makes the same assertion. Well, Erasmus used the Vulgate, and that's where the errors came from. So again, if you look at the facts of the history of the Textus Receptus and its translation, the correlation of the text, you'll see that it went through a great refining period, and that the accusation against Erasmus, and that he used later manuscripts, and that therefore you can't trust him, and that he used the Vulgate, you can't trust him, are actually proven false, because he himself had better manuscripts later on with later editions, as well as did Stephenus and Beza. So, but they'll keep throwing those things out in order to deceive those who don't understand the issue. But that's a simplistic mindset of an individual who cannot think, who wants to claim to be a scholar. A scholar would move on, would ask, would reset himself and say, if these guys missed it, maybe it's not an error. But he's already has to assert there's an error, so then he's got to ignore the fact that three textual scholars, ignored these same errors, supposedly errors, and just left them in there, which of course is absurd. But that's James White. That's the Alexandrian cult. This is the guys who are giving you the modern versions and telling you that you can't trust your King James Bible, but in fact they don't give you any Bible to trust in its place. Amen. Thank you.